Thank you, Eugene. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, which is Managing Global Studies with Siebel CTMS. This was a topic that was suggested by some of our past webinar attendees, so we thought we'd put on this webinar together. But we also wanted to get some information from our existing customers, existing companies that are using CTMS for global studies, so we can present some actual case studies that will be relevant. So we'll be going through that today. We got some really good information and feedback from our clients, and one of the things that we noticed was that while some of the clients were actually using the features to manage their global studies, we noticed that they're not using all the features. So we figured a webinar with demos of some of these features would be beneficial to both companies that are already using Siebel and those that are still evaluating it to be able to use it for their organization. So let me start out by introducing myself. My name is Budham Singh, and I'm the Vice President of the Clinical Trial Management Solution Practice at BioPharm. I've been working in the industry since '99 and almost exclusively been working with Siebel Clinical during that time. Before joining BioPharm a little over 5 years ago, I was part of Accenture's pharma R&D practice and leading Siebel CTMS implementations there as well. Overall, I've been now part of, I want to say, like 30 implementations of Siebel Clinical. And they all vary from implementations for pharmaceutical companies, CROs, medical device companies, and range from local implementations of less than 20 users to global implementations of over 4,000 users of Siebel Clinical. So now that I've introduced myself, I'd like to take just a minute to talk about my team here at BioPharm and explain a little bit more about what we do. We provide a variety of services and products related to clinical trial management. We manage implementations of Siebel Clinical, whether those are custom implementations or implementations of our Siebel Clinical Accelerator, Ascend. And if you've seen some of our previous webinars, you know that we do some extensive work with integrations in Siebel Clinical and related systems. Our approach to system implementation is very process-focused. We also provide our process consulting services to help organizations define and harmonize their SOPs and business process across their organization with respect to clinical trial management. And we also offer comprehensive training services and products related to Siebel Clinical and our Ascend solution, as well as some other applications as well. And that's just a glimpse of some of the services and products that we offer in the space within my practice. And at BioPharm, we have other practices as well, dealing with clinical data management, pharmacovigilance and safety, as well as clinical data warehousing. So if you're interested in any of that, please feel free to contact myself or, again, on our website for contact information. So here's a look at today's agenda. So first, we're going to look at some industry trends towards global trials and how even smaller organizations are doing more and more global studies. With this trend towards global studies, there are many new challenges that arise that need to be addressed. Next, we'll look at some case studies from companies that are using Siebel CTMS to manage global studies and look at some of the features that they have found beneficial. Then I'll go into some additional Siebel CTMS capabilities that can also help with global studies. And after explaining some of these features, I'll jump into the system and demonstrate some of these features live so you can get a feel for the capabilities available. And then I will then summarize, and then we'll open it up for question and answer. And again, for our Q&A session, if you do have any questions as we go through the presentation, feel free to submit your questions at any time in our chat feature, and then we'll try to address as many questions as possible during the Q&A session. So with that, let's get started. Okay. So first, let's look at the industry trends related to global studies. There is continual pressure on companies to reduce costs overall and shorten drug development timelines. We see this due to patents expiring and set to expire in the next few years, which means that there is increased pressure and competition from generics. Generally speaking, there's also a shrinking drug pipeline based on the reduction of FDA approvals for new molecular entities over the past several years. So fewer new drugs are making it to market due to this increased scrutiny from the FDA. So recently, organizations in developed markets are realizing the potential in conducting trials in emerging market countries to reduce their overall cost and speed their time to market. In analyzing these trends and looking at growth and investment from life science organizations, we see that, for example, since 2002, the number of FDA-regulated investigators based outside of the U.S. has grown by 15% annually. Conversely, the number of investigators in the U.S. has declined by 5.5%, which means U.S.-based companies are using more and more non-U.S. investigators to run their trials outside of the U.S. We can also see the trend a bit closer by looking at registries as well. And again, for example, we can see that in 2007, if we look at clinicaltrials.gov, reported that the 20 largest U.S.-based companies have more than 30% of their studies conducted completely outside of the U.S. So this is clearly showing a large trend towards more global studies for companies based in the U.S. Again, looking at the analysis, we're seeing that most of the rapid growth, according to these studies and registries, is in Latin America, Eastern Europe, and Asia, so a lot of that emerging market. So much of this rapid growth in FDA-regulated trials is primarily for confirmatory later-stage studies. So steady growth in these emerging regions is due to a lot of many factors, and we'll just touch upon these briefly, including lower relative study costs, study conduct costs in developing nations, harmonizing of good clinical practices and guidelines, well-positioned low-cost contract research organizations, and the availability of well-trained professionals and treatment-naive patients. So all of these factors are drawing companies to do more and more global studies. But with this emerging trend, there are several new challenges facing life science organizations. So we're going to discuss these four in today's presentation. So communication with study and site teams, adherence to regional and country-specific regulatory requirements, tracking payments in multiple currencies, and selecting the best non-local vendors and investigators. So the first challenge life science companies face with global studies is communication across the global team. There are obvious language and terminology differences, and even if English was the primary language in most cases, the use of different terminology causes miscommunication in some cases. There are also cultural differences in each of these areas that will affect how you conduct studies, how you interact with investigators and patients as well. Time zone differences, of course, also affect communication. In most cases, teams have to rely on email and written communication versus verbal, which has its own challenges. So here are a couple of quotes that we got that speak to these challenges. So standardizing terminology in our industry across the global organization was a difficult task without a centralized system. So those of us that have worked in sort of global environments, we know that just cultural differences and terminology differences just within our industry are present, and being able to standardize that terminology across a global team becomes a big challenge. And the second one, understanding cultural differences in each region and country is key to developing accurate estimates for work to be conducted in that area. So this was a key challenge as well, just knowing how different areas, different teams and different resources in these cultural differences had an effect on estimates of work with trials. The second challenge I'm sure you are all familiar with are regulatory challenges. So in each area of the world, there are different regulatory requirements for documentation, for submission to regulatory authorities. There are also regional patient privacy concerns that need to be addressed. So in addition to these regulatory requirements, each region may also simply have a different process that they need to be followed, which can be difficult to manage for global studies. Again, here are a couple quotes related to the topic. Each country has its own regulatory documentation, submission requirements, and ensuring that we are in compliance with all regional requirements is a large undertaking. And the second one, a different IRB IEC approval process and requirements. We have different data retention requirements. Internal trial approval process within the company is even different across regions, and they may use different document trial tracking systems. So each of these sort of speak to that regulatory requirements and how to maintain a similar process or even manage a process that's going to be different across countries. Financial challenges also come into play when we're dealing with global studies in multiple foreign countries. We need to track contract and site and vendor payments in a local country. We may need to reflect exchange rates in the contracts themselves if the payments are coming from a U.S. funding source or a non-local currency funding source. We need to maintain these exchange rates for each of these regions to accurately get an idea of total spend across the study. And total spend to date can be a very difficult metric to extract for studies that are managed globally without a centralized system. And the last challenge we'll cover today will be investigator and vendor selection. Going into emerging markets to conduct studies, it's going to be important to identify high-performing investigators and maintain those relationships with those high performers to ensure good performance on current and future studies. It's equally important to identify and manage vendors and service providers and manage their activities to ensure that they're meeting your expectations as well. So by establishing good relationships with high performers ensures success on future studies. And we'll see how Siebel CTMS can help with this. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we did something unique for this webinar. We identified some clients who are using CTMS, the Siebel CTMS, to manage global studies. We interviewed them about the nature of their trials and specifically about some of the features of Siebel CTMS that they're using to support their trials. We've selected 3 of those case studies to share with you today, and we'll go over a brief overview of each company and their global operation so you can relate to the size and type of organization and draw some comparisons with your own company as well. So for the first case study, we're looking at a US-based device company, and some of the characteristics of their typical global study are as follows. So 24 countries, they conduct trials in 24 countries, 1 to 30 sites per country, and 10 to 300 subjects per site. And here's a list of some of the countries in which they conduct their trials, so just to give you an idea of where this organization is coming from. So this company has been using Siebel CTMS since September 2009, and one of the features that they are using to manage global studies is the activity and document templates. So this is a very common feature that's used in this manner. Their biggest insight has been that we create the regulatory templates not around each country specifically, but around the most rigorous regulatory requirements. For example, IDE study and EU and American requirements. If certain documents are not needed, they use NA. So, and we'll look at this particular feature in our demonstration, but they took an approach where they're not necessarily creating new templates for each country necessarily, but specifically around some of the most rigorous regulatory requirements in that area. And if it doesn't apply, if those things don't apply, they're using a not applicable categorization against the activity or document. The next company is a pharmaceutical that, and some characteristics of their typical global study are as follows, and you can see that it's a much larger organization and much larger trials. So we're looking at 30 to 50 countries, and so it's much more spread out, and they have 6 to 10 sites per country, and they conduct their studies in a wide range of countries, as you can see here. So this organization has been using Siebel CTMS since May of 2011. And the main feature for global study management they use is the currency conversion. And they're using it in a very unique manner as well. And the biggest insight they have is, so they site payment information is integrated from our CROs. And the site payment information that is integrated from the CROs is in local currency. So, they're relying on service providers and vendors in each of these areas to actually manage their trial, and their CRO is taking care of all the payments to the sites in each of these areas in their local currency. And what the company needs is that information aggregated and converted into sort of a total dollar spent against each of those sites in each of those regions. So they rely on their currency conversion capability of Siebel to actually aggregate that up all the way to the protocol level. And the last case study is for a medical device company. This is a smaller organization, but still has global studies to manage, and they expect to grow more in that area, keeping in line with the trend that we discussed earlier. So they have typically 3 countries that they conduct trials in, 1 to 5 sites per country, with approximately 20 subjects per site. And they conduct their trials in the USA, France, and Germany primarily. But as I mentioned, they're looking to scale to more countries as they continue to grow. So this company has been using Siebel CTMS since March of 2012, and the main feature they've been using is also the activity and document template. And they plan to use currency conversions as well as they roll in additional modules around payments and site payments. Their biggest insight so far has been that it's very useful for meeting different global document tracking requirements, different study milestones across the global studies, and all levels of study information. The template customization makes managing the global studies easier. So again, the activity and document templates is a very common feature that's used to sort of delineate different processes and different documents being tracked in different regions. So we'll take a look at that in the demo portion. But we've seen that virtually every organization that is managing global studies uses that to its fullest potential. And with this organization, again, like I mentioned, they're going to be using currency conversions, which is another pretty common use of Siebel functionality for managing global trials. So what we've noticed when we did these interviews and created these case studies was that our clients are certainly using some of those features of Siebel CTMS, but there are other features that can be utilized to help manage global studies. So I'd like to go over these features in brief and then demonstrate them in the system as time permits. So we discussed the communication challenges the industry is facing with global studies, and Siebel CTMS can address some of these challenges with language and terminology by its capability for multi-language support for the user interface, for drop-down values, and for reports. So you can choose to actually render the entire application in different languages, so you can address the hurdle of language issues. You can also implement language-specific drop-down values. So they map to the same system values to standardize across geographies. So in each different region, if there's different terminology, even if we're talking about English, if they use different terminology for example, for some fields in the system for drop-down values, you can actually create different language-specific drop-down, but they'll map back to the same system value. So in the back end, it's pretty standardized. Siebel also has support for special character languages and Unicode. So if you choose to track information for your global studies in the local language, you can actually do so. It has special character capability. And I'll actually show you a screenshot example of this before we get into the demo. So the second thing here is the regulatory requirements. So we discussed the regulatory requirement challenges and also heard from clients in the case studies and how regional templates in the system have enabled them to ensure compliance in this area. For financials, Siebel Clinical has support for tracking multiple currencies within and across studies, and we can use this currency conversion to aggregate and roll up financial information to generate financial metrics that are often requested at the executive level. So one of the features that is often overlooked is the investigator and vendor selection in Siebel CTMS. And this is a multi-level capability. It has several different components to it. One, it gives the ability to record useful qualities of potential investigators and vendors, such as the technology and equipment at their facility, whether they have wireless internet, sub-zero refrigerators, on-site labs, site pharmacy. So really just the assets that they have at the facility, so it can serve as a pre-qualification capability where you can sort of filter through and find sites and vendors that meet your criteria for your upcoming study before you even do a qualification visit. You can put in types of and depth of experience for investigators, so whether they have experience with surgery, with implants, with any number of procedures that are going to be relevant for an upcoming study. You can put in patient populations to which they have access. So again, if you're having a targeted study, you can actually find investigators that deal with that specific patient population. And we can also put in things like languages that are spoken fluently. So if they have either working knowledge or fluent knowledge of specific languages, you can actually start to track that information against those potential investigators, the investigator database. Second, you can track their performance of investigators and vendors on trials as well. So objective assessments on their performance, so you can start to identify high performers both in the investigator database as well as from service providers and vendors that are performing services on trials. So you can start to gather those assessments and build a database of high performers. And so once you have that, the last pieces or last component of this capability is to select your high-performing investigators and vendors with the qualities that you need for future trials. So you start to build that information, build that database in the first two pieces, and then you use what we call in Ascend our site selection piece to actually identify investigators and vendors that are going to be sort of targeted for upcoming studies. So now we're going to look at each of these in a demonstration. But before I jump into the system, I do want to show you that screenshot of for the communications piece with the rendering the application in a different language. So this is a screenshot that I found that shows that the same application that's being deployed to say U.S. as well as China to teams in both locations. So essentially it's the same application, it's just being rendered differently in each of the locations. So you can see that a lot of the data is still in English, like the protocol number, protocol title, but things like that are drop-down values are rendered in both languages separately in the user interface. So this is something that you can use, and Siebel has this capability to be able to render the entire application in different languages and also drop down values. So you can overcome the hurdle of language issues. So let's move into the demo. I'm going to share my desktop. So the first thing we'll look at is related to financials, so currency conversion. So what we can see in the application is, let me query this. We're going to look at sites for a particular protocol. We can see that the sites are managing their payments in their local currency. So you can see that these studies these sites in France are, if I go into that site, we can see some of their payments and they're managing it in their local currency. So you can see that there's 8,000 euros here. If I go into a U.S. study, you can see that their payments are being generated in U.S. dollars. So all of this is being conducted or being generated in their local currency. So you can track your actuals for your sites depending on what your contracts have been, how your contracts have been set up. You get the ability to select the currency code for each site differently, and then when you roll up to your regions, each region has its own currency identifier as well. So you can see your roll-ups within that particular region. And then at the highest level, at the protocol level, you can see your currencies basically converted into the currency that's specific for that study. So here, for that same PTCL 101 study that we were looking at the sites for that had euros as well as dollars, we can see that their earned to date, paid to date, and expense amounts are all in U.S. dollars. So this is being converted using exchange rates that are in the system, that are maintained in the system by an administrator. So you still have to use the system to administer exchange rates, but you can do that as frequently as you deem necessary. The system itself is not meant to be necessarily for all financial reconciliation. This is more to again provide those metrics on total spend to date across this particular study. So if we're managing multiple sites across multiple countries, multiple currencies, at the very least we have the system rolling up to a single currency, so we can have these metrics readily available for a global study manager against that protocol. And each of those protocols then also rolls up into your program. So if you set up your programs, again, your program level also has a currency code categorization, so you can choose to see total spend against a particular program. So all the studies against the anemia program within your organization, you can see total spend to date against that. So that's our ability, sort of out of the box ability for currency conversions. Again, you do have to maintain and manage your currencies in the system, and that's done through administration directly in the application. So if we're looking at currencies, here's a list of all your currencies, and if I look at, let me see if I can, yeah, so if we look at euros, for example, we have multiple exchange rates that are defined for euros against other currencies. So this is what the table, this is the table that the currency conversions are using to draw those aggregations up to the protocol level. So the second thing that we'll look at is the activity and document templates. And like I mentioned, most organizations, I would say if not all, that are using Siebel CTMS for global studies are using this capability to define different activity templates or different document and activity templates for different regions. And I'll show you how that's done in the administration area. So this is how you would set this up. So here we have 4 different regional templates. Two are related to milestones, and 2 are related to regulatory submissions. So if we look at the USA region milestone template, you can see here are all the standard milestones that we need to track as an organization if we're conducting this for sites in the USA. If we look at your EMEA regional template, you can have a different set of milestones, completely different set of milestones that need to be tracked. So if there's even activities that need to be done that are different in each region, this is where you would track that information. Same thing goes for regulatory submissions. So if we look at the regulatory submissions, this is a pretty short template, but you can have different set of activities and documents in each of these templates. So you would apply them to their specific regions. So if I'm a regional study manager, for example, and I'm going into our protocol 101, and I'm a regional study manager for France, to go into tracking that information, I would simply create a new template or create a new activity plan and select the appropriate template. So since I'm in France, I know I need to select the EMEA region milestone template. So as soon as I apply that, my regional templates, as per our SOPs, have been applied, and now I can start tracking that information. I can do the same thing for the submission. So again, I'm selecting the EMEA regional template. So that gives us all of the activities and documents that need to be tracked for this region. So when we're talking about these differences between countries, where regulatory submissions and documents and essential documents and things like that come into play, you can actually set these up one time in the administration area as per that region's or that country's regulatory requirements. So once they're in here, anytime we conduct a study, in that particular region. We take the guesswork out of what needs to be tracked by putting these templates in. So now that these things are in here, I can start to just track the start and completion date of each of these milestones, and I can also start to track all the regulatory documents specific to that country as well. Okay. And then the last thing that we'll look at is that site selection piece, or that vendor selection. So this has, again, like I said, several components to it. The first piece is what we have used in Ascend called categories. So when we look at a particular investigator or a particular CRO, for example, what we can start to track against these contacts are these categories, or these additional qualities and attributes of that particular contact. So here you can see that we're tracking that this individual has patient population or demographics of heart patients, of geriatric patients. He has experience in implant surgery, heart surgery, and prosthetics, and languages. They're fluent in English and Spanish. So, and just to, let's go into a new one. So here, if I wanted to add additional categories, these are all system, they're created by the administrator, so I can actually go in and it's standard values. So if I wanted to track additional experience for this particular investigator, I'd click experience, and then I'd select values, and these are the values that are standard. So this is up to an administrator in your organization to set up these categories, to set up these attributes and values in the system to be able to track all of this information. So you can start to build out this this particular investigator's attributes. So if we're talking about languages, again, we can select and say that this person is fluent in Spanish. So we're basically building these attributes against the investigator database. You can do the same thing on the account level. So if I look at institutions, so if I'm looking at a CRO, for example, I can do the same thing under categories. It's going to be different categories, but I can start to track assets that they have or equipment at the facility, if we're talking about sites, for example. So we can actually track a lot of information against these categories and against accounts as well. The second piece of this component is assessment. So when we talk about performance, high-performing investigators, we can start to perform assessments against these investigators and organizations as well. So assessments are driven by templates also in the system, so you can standardize the way you perform assessments. So here I'm going to perform a PI, primary investigator assessment. So there's my investigator assessment template, objective assessment of a PI's performance during a trial. Click OK, and now we have the standard assessment that's been applied to this investigator, and all I simply have to do is just go through and answer the questions. So ability to recruit subjects, their high adherence to study protocols. We had some protocol violations. Turnaround time was very quick. SA reporting, he had timely and accurate. Query rates were low. So you can actually build out a very objective performance assessment against a particular investigator. And this will generate a score and a percent for that particular investigator. And the key thing is to make it objective. You can, again, do the same thing for service providers. So if we're talking about CROs, I'm just going to pick one here and pretend it's a CRO, and we'll go into assessment. And I think I have a sample assessment. So we have a vendor assessment, and we have a CRO vendor performance assessment. So if you're wanting to evaluate certain aspects of the relationship between you and a service provider, you can actually build out that particular assessment as well. And again, these are completely customizable. So and all through administration. So your organization can define what the assessment attributes are, what the values are, what the scores are. So all of that can be managed by your organization. So once you have these assessments, once you have these qualities and categories sort of build out in both of these areas, the next piece is that how do we go about selecting those individuals? How do we go about finding those individuals and organizations that we want to target for our upcoming studies? So that's where site selection comes into play. So under site selection, we can certainly still track basic queries like if I want to see investigators in the state of Texas, I can simply just put in that criteria. But I want to add more criteria. I want to make sure that they're high performers, so their assessment score is greater than 80%. And I want to, since we're doing this in Texas, we're going to have a lot of bilingual patients, so I want to be able to select someone who has fluency in Spanish. Here we go, Spanish fluent. So you can see that I'm actually choosing very specific criteria for my investigators. So geographic criteria, language, or I can even I can choose that experience or demographics category as well. And here I'm choosing to look at only high performers that we've worked with before because we've performed an assessment on them. So once I add all that criteria, I can hit go, and it'll generate a list of investigators that meet all of those criteria. So there's 3 investigators in Texas that have a percent score greater than 80% and are fluent in Spanish. So now I have this target list. I can start to send out communication to these particular investigators for upcoming studies. So this is, again, one of the features that I think are overlooked when we're talking about global studies. This is something that, especially if you're a large global organization and have many departments that may use investigators and service providers across their studies, and if there's another department looking for investigators or service providers for upcoming studies, they can actually, even if they personally haven't used these people before, this database and the site selection piece allows them to see institutions and individuals that as a global organization we've worked with before that have are high performers and that meet some of the criteria that we're looking for in upcoming studies. Okay. So with that, I'll go back to our presentation, and just in summary, so we've seen that there's a clear trend towards running clinical trials in multiple countries, despite the inherent challenges that we've listed here. There's definitely a cost-benefit analysis that organizations have done and seen that it's much more cost-effective in some cases to conduct studies globally. We've shown via the case studies that companies like yours that are using Siebel CTMS to manage global studies. However, again, several of our Siebel's useful features for managing such trials are being underutilized. So really just to try to bring that to light and start to use some of the other features of Siebel, I think is going to be beneficial. Siebel CTMS can be used to address all of those concerns. So communication, regulatory, financial, investigator, vendor challenges through some of the features that we've discussed and demonstrated in today's webinar. So I hope that's been helpful. So with that, I'll move it to our Q&A portion. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in that chat feature so we can try to address those questions.
Great. Thanks, Padam. All right, so we have a few questions. I'm going to take them a little bit out of order, but we'll try to get through as many as possible. So the first question is, can you explain how the currency conversion works in the system? I believe it's based on the exchange date. Do you suggest updating the exchange date so the currency code is more accurate?
So yeah, so the currency conversion, it does work on an exchange date. So in that currency exchange rate table, you can actually set up multiple rates for the same two currencies and actually put in an exchange date for that rate. So as you know, we have daily changes in exchange rates. So you can actually set up multiple exchange rates in the system. The way that the currency exchange rate calculation works is that and I'll use a couple examples. So for example, in one study, you could have a contract that says, this is the exchange rate that we're going to use. We're not going to fluctuate our payments based on daily changes in exchange rate. We're going to use this rate, and that's the static rate for the rest of the trial. If the contract's written like that, you basically, at the site and region levels, you don't change the exchange date. I know this gets confusing when we're talking about exchange rate and date, but you don't change the exchange date because you're using the rate that was established on that particular date, and we're not fluctuating it. When you have fluctuations and you're actually you want to maintain those, when you however frequent you update your exchange rate table, let's say it's monthly. If you update it monthly and your sites and actual payments that are going out the door are supposed to reflect that monthly change, you're basically having to maintain the rate table as well as the exchange dates on at the study level as well. So you're basically telling the study that for future payments, you're going to use this latest exchange date. So in the beginning of the study, you might have used the rate that you established on January 1st, but as time progresses, let's say you do it quarterly, in March you update the exchange date for the site to March 1st, and it will basically look back to your exchange rate table, your admin table, and look at the rate that is most current as close to March. So it actually it becomes a little bit more maintenance on both levels when you're changing the rate multiple times throughout the year. But to get more accurate, if the rates are fluctuating quite a bit, to get more accurate sort of aggregations at that highest level, that's what's going to need to happen. And in some cases, this is done through integration. So we've done this before where, if there's a financial system that has a regular sort of moving exchange rate, in some cases we take like an aggregation, a monthly aggregation of that or an average, and apply those rates automatically to the admin table and then the other table. So there's ways to automate it, but again, it's either more manual maintenance or it's going to be more upfront cost to do that sort of automation of the exchange rate table.
Great, thank you. Next question is, can budgets be developed in CTMS, for example, components, approval workflow, etc., or are budgets built outside of CTMS and added for tracking purposes?
Budgets be developed for components, approval workflow. Can we ask whoever submitted that question to clarify that a little bit? So are we talking about like study budgets or if you can clarify what budgets you're asking about, maybe I can address that question.
Okay, and next question: are CRO affiliations maintained for each account/contact? Are there CRO profile maintenance screens available?
So affiliations can be maintained for each account and contact. And it's not specific to CRO affiliations. It can be site affiliations and contact-to-contact affiliations, and obviously organization to contact and organization to organization. So all of those affiliations can be maintained in CTMS. It's part of that, building that investigator, that contact and account database to establish those relationships between those entities. So it's outside the context of a study, but you can certainly maintain all of those affiliations in Siebel CTMS.
Great. And the individual clarified in regards to budgets. This person was referring to study budgets because she noted a budget field on the financial screen shown during the demo.
Oh, right. So in the demo, what we're looking at is our Ascend solution, and the budgeted amount that you looked at was specific to study level expenses. So for those of you that are using Siebel, you know that it handles investigator payments quite well. So when we're talking about earned to date and paid to date at the site level, site payments are handled pretty well in the system. One of the things that we found that's not easily trackable is protocol level expenses. So study expenses outside of just payments to sites. So when we're talking about payments to vendors, travel costs, shipping, printing, etc., any sort of expenses that are incurred for the study. So we actually created a new module for protocol expenses, and so we have the ability to create a budgeted expenses as well as actual expenses, so you can see what's been budgeted for each of these different expense items and what's been incurred. So that's in that module, you're building all of your study level budget, expense budgets directly in the system, and then as you're invoiced for them, these are more like invoiceable. So as you invoice or as you incur those expenses, you basically track them against that line item, and so it totals it against that line item as well as aggregates it up to the study level.
Great, thank you. Have your customers asked for features to support country feasibility assessments? This step might be completed in advance of site investigator selection.
I think we've actually had this question asked a few times from our clients, and we've utilized the activity of document templates in the same way, or we've utilized those to actually meet this requirement. So for country feasibility, they actually created a template specific for that, and they would basically go through that and go through those tasks or go through those. It was more like like a questionnaire, and that basically met their requirements for country feasibility. We haven't had an issue with, you have to obviously, come up with templates that reflect what you want to track in that feasibility and basically be able to have that in the system against that country. So we haven't really had an issue of that not meeting anyone's requirements and actually developing a brand new module for country feasibility. So the approach that we typically take is try to reuse as much of the configuration as possible, to meet the requirements. And if there's some tweaking that we need to do, we can do it. But there hasn't been a need for someone to request a brand new module around country feasibility.
Great, thank you. So we had a few more questions, but I want to be able to end right on time. So if you feel like you want them still answered, please do contact us via email or phone. So that'll end our Q&A session. And if you want to review this webinar after the fact, you can review it on our website. It'll be up within 24 hours. We'll also be sending you a recording via email. I also want to mention that we have two more upcoming webinars. We have one on Oracle Life Sciences Data Hub, which takes place, I believe, September 17th, right before the Oracle Health Sciences User Group Conference. And we also have one on Oracle Clinical Development Analytics and how to use it with Siebel CTMS, and that will take place in November. So in a few months, that'll come up. And please do register for that. You can access the webinar registration form on our website anytime.
And Eugene,
thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, so the individual that asked the question around the budgeted expense amount, I think we do have a webinar that around payments that goes over that functionality in a decent amount of detail. So I just wanted to mention that they can review that on our website as well.
Perfect, thanks. And in front of you, you have a contact us slide, which shows the various people you can contact for more information on BioPharm's offerings. So thank you all for joining. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day or evening. Take care.